good morning, and welcome to season 2 of Conversations with Jack. I prefer to think of this less as a season 2, as more as a continuation. So this is episode like 20 or something. I don't know, but I just took a little vacation and took a couple of weeks to get back into work. Drove across the United States, which if you have not done, I highly recommend. And if you're from another country and you're thinking about doing it, you should definitely come over and give it a try. That's you, Paddy. So this morning we have with us Paddy from Tendermint, who is working on Cosmos Cash. Also, before we get started, I am remiss if I don't mention our sponsors. Sommelier Finance, which is where I'm working right now. We're working to deploy the Gravity Bridge into production and build protocols for liquidity providers on top of Uniswap v3 right now. Lots of exciting stuff happening over there. Go follow us over on sommelier.finance. And also, we also have OmniFlix Media, run by the indefatigable Sisla, who is behind the production of Conversations with Jack. Please go check out OmniFlix.network. Lots of exciting things happening over there. The long and the short of that is it is a chain for content creators on top of the Cosmos SDK with native NFT support, as well as support for managing a large library of video assets. Very cool stuff over there. Go check out OmniFlix Media. So without further ado, Paddy, do you mind telling us a little bit more about what you do at Tendermint, sort of what your background is, and what you're working on right now?
Yeah. And thanks for the intro. I didn't realize this was season 2, episode 1. I feel privileged.
Hey, welcome. We're doing it.
Yeah. This is great. I'm a protocol developer at Tendermint, and I work mainly on the Cosmos Cash protocol, which is a protocol. It's a research project at the moment, but it's a protocol aimed at e-money token providers and simplifying that whole flow. A little bit of background about myself. I'm not even sure where to start. I've been involved in crypto for a long time. I started my career at a custom development part of SAP, and towards the end of that, we started working on some blockchain tech. So that's where I was. Before that, I was writing some terrible smart contracts in Solidity a while ago. And then I started writing some.
We've all had that period where we're writing smart contracts in Solidity. So cheers.
And then smart contracts with chain code for Hyperledger. And then I worked for a company called Brickblock, which are a great company building securities on the Ethereum network, writing some smart contract code there and building web interfaces around that. And then I transitioned to Tendermint, and it's been great working with the team here. I've really enjoyed it. So it's a really nice community, and everything's from my perspective, I love it. Like, I'm just like all blockchain natives, all love chatting. It's great.
You know, that's one of the things that I love most about Cosmos is the community. And, you know, jumping on calls like this with folks like yourself is just kind of one manifestation of that. Cosmos, in one way, you can kind of think of it as a support network for blockchain addicts who like to write code. But there's sort of something missing from your intro there. What brought you into crypto in the first place? Like working at SAP, working at Hyperledger, those are like large kind of traditional tech companies. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of folks in that world who end up coming over to blockchain. What spurred you particularly to make the leap?
Yeah, you see, it was always the interest in tech for me. Like, as in, I spent a few years building like traditional web applications, like client server architecture or microservice architectures in Kubernetes. And I was like, okay, this is interesting, but realistically you get to a point and you're like, what's next? And then people are like, well, we have this distributed computer and there's a virtual machine and there's multiple machines and they're all talking to each other and they're all like communicating on state. And by the way, you can write code that runs on it. I was like, oh my God, that sounds so cool. And then once you kind of get the bug and you realize what it unlocks, as in like decentralized governance, and you understand like crypto economics, and you get into this whole new environment, this whole new world, this whole new way of thinking. And it's like, wait a second, traditional ways of building applications, traditional ways of governance made sense up until now, but now we have these tools, they don't make sense anymore. So it's like, okay, let's build something that makes sense, that people can communicate over, that people can agree on, and like, let's have fun while we're doing it. Like, it's just like straight on my street. I like be hacking together smart contracts in Rust in Cosmosm, and also building my own blockchain to communicate with them over IBC. I'm like, whoa, lads, this is where we are. So,
it's really cool. And, you know, I think one of the things that you kind of come from this more traditional industry, and, you know, I think we're going to move this into Cosmos Cash here in just a second.
Yeah.
I think that in more traditional industry, you've got these platforms that are developed by these big centralized entities. They focus, you know, they get built to work once, and then there's a lot of focus on documentation. There's a lot of focus on user onboarding, these sort of traditional business things. And, you know, from an in-developer standpoint, folks like you and me, when you show up at these systems, a system like Kubernetes has a very different feel than a system like the Cosmos SDK or a system like Ethereum, that is, instead of being designed from the top down and built out and then rolled out in a way that customers can use it, there's this bubbling up of technology from all of these different entities. And the job of you as a developer is to grab the best in class from a bunch of different pieces and kind of put them together. Can you talk about how that transition went for you? Because I think that's kind of the hard part for a lot of developers making the transition over into blockchain from more traditional tech.
Yeah, you see, I love tech at heart, so I felt it kind of a natural progression. I think for me, one of the nicest things about the SDK is actually that iteration speed. And that's what drew me towards the SDK, is that you can have an idea and you can build it out in like a fraction of a time as you would because of the tools that are available in the SDK at the moment. And transitioning from, I always think of it as like, say, 8-bit to 16-bit or something, or something like, it's just this massive paradigm shift that you can either, obviously we'll always have traditional web apps, but there is a paradigm shift happening at the moment to like traditional databases to this more kind of open system. And that's kind of the direction we're going with Cosmos Cash as well. It's like, we're trying some things that are experimental that we feel are the forward looking, and what we can really put a stamp on and be like, this project can be used as a reference for projects going forward that want to achieve the same goals that the project set out to achieve. I'm sorry if that did. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, I mean it did. But let me just sort of fill in the rest of the thought here. You know, a company like SAP, you know, or Hyperledger, for example, you know, they use
Hyperledger in their cloud platform. So that was where.
Oh, cool. You know, you build these systems and then you go pitch larger entities to go adopt those systems. And I think a lot of what's been missing in crypto is the sort of ability to go pitch these larger entities and then sort of convert them over into blockchain. And I think that Cosmos Cash is one of the best examples I've seen of blockchain native companies trying this strategy of building a really fully realized, very well designed system that has supporting documentation. And I think most importantly, supporting regulatory opinions and effort. So talk to me a little bit more about exactly what Cosmos Cash is and what market you guys are looking to serve.
So it's an e-money protocol. So the idea is that you can, as an issuer, you need to issue your tokens, and we've built a chain to support that. But the focus is on regulatory compliance, which is a difficult thing to capture in a blockchain, because it kind of melds, as you said, it melds the traditional world of finance with this new paradigm, the blockchain paradigm that's emerging. And like there's a few, we're doing obviously focusing on Europe at the start, because it's just like we need a smaller use case. We can't just be like, we're going to focus on every single regulation ever. And we're trying to particularly do AML compliance in a Cosmos Cash protocol. there's different ways to achieve this.
Just to back up just a little bit, that e-money word is one that I think folks in the U.S. and other places in the world might not be familiar with. But e-money is something that the European Central Bank and other European regulators have been talking about for quite a while. I mean, going on a decade or two at this point. And it has a lot of sort of like traditional financial technology connotations, but I do think that folks like yourself are trying to adopt it for blockchain and to use it as a way to introduce more of these sort of decentralized technologies into the financial mainstream. Would you say that's kind of a fair way to describe that?
Yeah, it's essentially a collateralized stable token at its base, which is like every euro that's in a bank account, some entity's bank account is minted on chain, and like, to get people to be able to use that, you need to follow to get the people to be able to use that, there's two ways you can achieve it. You can just have one, this is probably a little bit technical, but we'll just go into it. You can just have one module in Cosmos SDK that's an issuer module, and you can push everything to do with KYC, know your customer, which is like validating an identity, a person who is, you can push that onto the issuer of the e-money token. Which is one way to achieve it. And I think this is kind of what USDC does. They have like a platform that they expect issuers to ensure the KYC is know your customer, and the identity is verified by these issuers. But what we're trying to achieve, and this is a big core concept, and this is what we've been looking at for quite a while now. And our team, super talented team, has been looking at self-sovereign identities and how to bring self-sovereign identities, which in my opinion, I could be wrong, is the next big step in blockchain development. It's like, we have these awesome ways of transferring value between people. We have these, and maybe it goes a little bit against traditional crypto, but to meld the traditional finance world and crypto or issuing, leveraging the benefits we get from using distributed systems or blockchains. We need to meld the two, and we think self-sovereign identity is one of these building blocks that we need to. Maybe it's not needed for every blockchain, but certainly if we want to adhere to on-chain, to get the benefits of on-chain or blockchains, we need to build some sort of self-sovereign system, some sort of identity system that's privacy protecting, users own their own data, and yeah, so that's the angle we're going for. We have an issuer module, which can be like an e-money issuer. And then we also have these two other modules, a decentralized identifier module and a verifiable credential module. And we use these three modules together to the identifier module, DID, which is the DID spec is online. We're just adhering to that. And then we use a verifiable credential module, which is, again, verifiable credential module. The spec is online. It's W3C. It's not completely agreed on yet, but it's working that way. And in this way, sorry, I'm a chatterjack. Please continue.
No, Paddy, you're covering a lot of really good ground in touching on a lot of these core concepts. I do want to back up just a little bit before we jumped right from e-money issuers to DIDs. I want to just take a quick pause and brag on your team for a little while, because you guys have done the really hard work of talking with regulators, working to understand exactly what is needed in terms of software in order to make things regulatorily compliant, and then you built that software to kind of do that. I know that your team had some time with the European Central Bank. I know you've talked to a number of regulators. Can you talk a bit about the regulatory strategy for Cosmos Cash? And I think we're going to do some follow-on shows with some other folks from the team over the next couple of months, to dive more deeply into these topics, but I don't want to pass this up, because it's kind of an important part of what you're doing.
Yeah, and just as a little caveat, I'm an engineer, so as soon as we're talking about tech, I'm super excited. Yeah. So please feel free to pull me back at any stage.
Well, the tech stuff's super important, and the DID thing for me personally, like, I've been to multiple internet identity workshops, which is kind of where the DIDs came out of, and I worked at a company called Blockstack, which was building self-sovereign identity right around when this DID spec was being developed. I followed this for a few years. This has been something that's been interesting to me. So I do want to dig into that more deeply, but I don't want to miss the regulatory stuff too.
Of course. We actually work closely with a company that have been great called Amagis Capital that did a report for us on the MiCA framework, which is the market in crypto assets framework that's coming out in Europe. And this is this served the basis of the protocol definition. So we worked with Amagus Capital. They provided us a detailed report. We translated that report into requirements. And then we're working off those requirements while keeping an eye on MiCA. In terms of meeting the ECB and stuff, that was like, I'm too much of an engineer to meet in those big boardrooms to talk to those guys. They'd be like, who's this guy with his crypto t-shirts on talking to us? But that was led by Alessio and David as well, two of the members of the team. So they can give you the updates with regards to the ECB meeting and also the meeting with the regulators and stuff, because I would be too smiley and too laughy to meeting in a serious boardroom. Those guys.
Totally. And I absolutely feel you on that. So let's sort of, obviously the things that regulators are worried about are these sort of, they have this kind of eye of Sauron, and they want to see all the financial transactions that exist in the world. And they want to make sure that the systems that they're rubber stamping they're able to be seen, and they can link these identities on chain to real humans. And I think that to sort of that is kind of antithetical to the ideals of crypto for a lot of people. But I think that Cosmos kind of squares these circles and allows all of these different entities to coexist within this IBC world. And in IBC, we have things like Penumbra, which is a project from some of the Zcash team members, where it's a fully private zone available via IBC, and you can easily go over there and get privacy. And you can also use some of these e-money zones that the Cosmos Cash team is working on. So don't hear KYC, AML, regulatory compliant, and think this is bad. What these people are doing is not right. We're Paddy and Alessio and like all of these Cosmos folks, like we're pretty cyberpunky, and this is a necessary way that we're going to need to onboard some of these traditional financial institutions. So with that in mind, talk a little bit more about the DID framework and kind of what that enables in terms of verifiable credentials, as well as giving entities human readable identifiers.
I will as well. It's if we're building a system that is monitorable with identities, it's like that system kind of already exists, except it's not public. So it's like we're just trying to bend. Like there's always going to be the kind of overview that's Sauron's eye, but like with technology and with some protocols that we're building, we can kind of bend it more in a public favor. So it's like, I think Alessio has a great line for this project, and it's like democratizing the payment industry. Like I don't want some random auditor that I've never seen in my life audit a chain and say this person is doing something illegal. I want someone in the community that is really interested in the chain's health and doesn't want to see people scammed. I want that person who's very tech savvy to run a script and be like, a money mule is a scenario, an AML scenario that you can go through. I want this person who's really passionate about the decentralization and really passionate about a governance of a financial system to be like, okay, I've recognized this money mule and I've submitted it to the system, and now we can reward that person, as opposed to like there's one person who can access financial transactions under lock and key. It's like, no, we're democratizing it. We want to get it to as much people as possible, and also, if you enable IBC, there's just the possibilities are endless. And again, the traditional system, but like it's not going to be the same forever. We've noticed from technology that it just constantly improves, and we always are going to be improving. And it's just like we have this monolith application, which is the banking system, that we want to just take pieces of and make it a little bit more usable, a little bit quicker, a little bit better. And in that way, we kind of take baby steps towards the future of the payment industry, which is kind of I prefer, I didn't even have a picture of myself for this thing. I don't like being that. I have no social media. Like, it's just kind of, I'm working, and also the credentials that we're issuing, and we'll go into the IDs after this. Sorry for the tangent. Yeah, the credentials that we're issuing, we have a focus on, we have a focus on privacy. Like everything that we're doing is privacy respecting up to the point that we meet regulation. And then when the privacy meets regulation, we have to sit down and we have design sessions. Like we have 2 design sessions a week that we break out and we discuss in detail the different aspects of the system, how we can improve them. Should we be storing DIDs on chain? Should we be anchoring DIDs on chain? These are the things that we're actively working towards to build a better system that people can use and be a part of and vote on and have governance and not have the eye of Sauron is a good one.
So maybe it's helpful to sort of talk through that decision of how to anchor DIDs on chain and whether or not to, as sort of an example of some of the privacy trade-offs and some of the design considerations that you guys have.
Yeah. Well, just a DID, just to explain, because maybe a DID is just a generic identifier on a decentralized network. So it's a DID, decentralized identifier, and this is one of the modules that is part of the Cosmos Cash protocol. And the decision right now, because one of the main benefits, but one of my favorite things about the Cosmos SDK I mentioned before, it's iteration speed. So you can build something, test it out, iterate, build something, test it out, iterate, and you get this kind of nice cycle of improvements over time, as opposed to having to decide on what crypto we want to use as a signature algorithm before you do anything. So in terms of anchoring, right now we store the DIDs on chain, which is kind of, it's a design decision we made to make progress, and we know we're still actively discussing this in design sessions, and we're trying to work out what the best way of, if you have multiple wallets with multiple DID methods, what's the best way to have them on chain. And anchoring them on chain is a good way to do it, but right now we just have the core spec and it's in a module. And if people want to check it out, it's all public, it's all open source. So feel free to create issues or discussions or talk to us about it on the repo. But yeah, right now the privacy respecting part of it is part of it. You would have your DID in an identity wallet or something, or some sort of local storage. And then you would just have some sort of hashed value of that on chain, and you could validate that in some way. But right now we just store the bytes that represent a DID, just the base DID method on chain. And it's like, if it's more private, like privacy, it's not binary, like, and this is from all the privacy places you go, it's between 0 and 1. So you can have 0 is no privacy and 1 is very, very private. And we're just kind of treading this to see what the trade-offs between where on this scale of 1 to 0 can we land to make it perfectly as close to private as we possibly can make it for users to feel safe, versus as close to private as we can make it for regulators to feel safe and issuers to feel safe.
So maybe it's helpful to talk through sort of a concrete use case of these DIDs and their cousins, verifiable credentials or verifiable claims. Like if you have a decentralized identifier, you can sign a piece of data and say that this identity claims X, and that's basically what a verifiable claim is. But you can easily imagine how those pieces get put together to create a KYC system. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
so essentially this is the two. You have a DID that identifies something, be it a person, a thing, that you have a key that controls that. An issuer, exactly right. And then you have a credential system, which is another part of the DID spec, which some issuer can, so I'll use Bob in this case. We have a few scripts on a
Bob and Alice?
that run. Bob and Alice, the two most famous people in software development.
Our buddies, Bob and Alice, yeah.
But so Bob wants to be issued an e-money token, and Bob would create himself on the Cosmos Cash protocol. He would create a decentralized identifier for himself and attach his key to it. Bob would then go to an e-money issuer, EIDAS are the European is the European regulation that allows identity issuance on chain. So Bob would go to an EIDAS compliant identity provider, and they would issue him with what we would consider an identity credential. And this credential would be signed by the EIDAS compliant provider would create themselves a DID, and a regulator would sign their credential. But we'll just stick to the Bob and the EIDAS. So the EIDAS then can issue a verifiable credential, sign that credential, and attach it to Bob's decentralized identifier using these are all things that are in the spec. Like Bob would Bob could add a key of the issuer plus the capability to add certain things to his DID. And this is the way the DID spec is very powerful. And then if Bob wants an e-money token, this is what the self-sovereign identity, this EIDAS compliant, which is the European regulation, would issue Bob a credential which would represent his identity, which would be privacy respecting. The privacy respecting is another thing that we'll have to go into, and that's the zero knowledge stuff, but that's further down the line. And then Bob would be able to, when he has his DID and his DID references his identity credential, this is what we refer to as a self-sovereign identity. And in this way, Bob has completed a KYC. He has complete control over his DID and what's attached to it. And now he can go to an e-money provider. And if you think of traditional e-money providers, every e-money provider or every bank that you sign up to you would have to complete a KYC. But in this way, we can optimize that process, and we can say this EIDAS provider, well, in Europe for the moment, but we can scale it out from Europe. This EIDAS compliant identity provider has issued this credential to this person. So if we trust that EIDAS provider, we no longer need Bob to complete his KYC, because this credential has been issued to Bob. So he can just, once the validation has been done on the credential, so Bob provides some sort of proof that the credential that is attached to his identifier has been, first of all, issued by the correct key or DID, and then has also the correct data inside it, which is where the selective disclosure, if you can prove that the data is correct, and if you can prove that it's signed by the EIDAS compliant identity provider, then that's Bob's identity. And then the e-money issuer could then transfer, well, Bob would transfer to an account, whatever, the €100, and then the issuer could mint 100 of the tokens to Bob's address. And like then you have that's the protocol would work best. And then if you kind of had an IBC running outside that, you can imagine how, like, then you have this collateralized stable token that's regulatory compliant, because any transfer that Bob makes, this privacy respecting Bob credential, because the AML doesn't say that we need to know exactly who they are at that point in time. It just means they can compel someone to reveal that identity. So everything on chain is privacy respecting, but if one of the community members audits the chain, or if someone audits the chain and they realize that this person is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, they can submit some sort of evidence, and then they can be rewarded. So again, nothing, like, I have to say, everything I say, we have to caveat it on it, and it's still a research project. But these are the directions that we're heading, and we seem to, with the different working groups that we're involved in, and with the different with the different identity issuers and the way Europe is going with electronic identities. It's like, I always laugh because something is posted in our Slack channel, and we're like, whoa, we thought about this 2 months ago, and now it's coming up in this working group. Or, oh, we were thinking about this long ago, and now it's coming up in this group. And we're like, what? And that's happened, like, since the start of the project, that's happened like 5 or 6 times. So I'm starting to think, like, obviously some of our assumptions could be incorrect, or some of the implementation could be a little bit off. But again, we've cut out a piece of marble and we're trying to make a statue. We're whittling down the different edge cases. And
I mean, a piece of software that any bank in Europe can pick up and then instantly become kind of crypto native in a regulatorily compliant way. That is a killer app that, very, very cool. So we're coming up to the end of the half an hour here, but we do have a couple of questions from the audience.
Yeah, please. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them, guys.
Absolutely. This was relatively easy. You've been speaking to it quite a bit already. Pramod Rohit, who is a longtime listener of Conversations with Jack. And by the way, you're welcome I'm glad I'm continuing these, and thank you for continuing to come. So thank you for saying so. Pramod asks, Paddy, do you see self-sovereign identities as a single sign-on with Know Your Customer, or will it be a case where anyone can create pseudo-identities as well? Also, will data access in this model be federated? There's a lot there.
Yeah.
So maybe take it one part at a time.
Yeah, I think with the self sign-on stuff, there is in the spec, it talks about self sign-on and different keys that you can use to use like some sort of Diffie-Hellman to ensure that you can communicate. So like, I haven't done much research in it, so I can't be like, yes, 110% we're going to do that. But it seems likely that will be the case. And data access to the model will be federated. I'd need more context on that. I'm not sure what that means. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Just to add a little bit more context here as well, Paddy, or Pramod, with my understanding and knowledge around DIDs. I think the original intention of DIDs, if you go back to the original documents from the Internet Identity Workshops, the idea is that any individual can have a number of different identities, and they can choose to link those identities in any combination that they choose or not link them. So you can easily see a case where people have pseudo-identities that are maybe weakly linked via data on a number of different blockchains to KYC identities. And they also might have pseudo-identities that are not at all linked to some KYC identities. But the vision here is that you can easily create and throw away identities or use an identity to build a reputation over a long period of time. And the protocol doesn't care what you do with these identities, and it kind of expects that people have a lot of them. I have an identity with Google. I have an identity with, all of these other internet platforms that I work with. And in much the same way, we will have DIDs for a number of different blockchains that you work with. And those may or may not share the same keys. They may or may not be linked cryptographically, i.e. I've sent transactions between some of these wallets. And there's no one-to-one mapping of identities to people. Also, these DIDs are built to be able to describe machines. I was working with a startup called Occam for a little while that was using DIDs for Internet of Things applications and giving each entity within these IoT systems that they were building their own keys and their own identities so that you can do verifiable IoT data. There's a lot of applications for this technology. It's very flexible and it's really cool. If you don't know, I would suggest you look into it.
Yeah, how flexible it makes interacting with a blockchain is one of the aspects I really like as well. But great question. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, totally. Also, Paddy, I think that is the end of our time, and thank you very much for joining us this week. Any last words before we call it a day here?
No. Thanks for having me on, and it was lovely getting the chance to chat about this protocol, because we're kind of trying to build a public good, and it's nice to be able to talk in public about it.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to doing more stuff on this. And Paddy, if you ever want to come back on and chat about anything, please just holler at me. Before we run today, I do want to say thank you again to our sponsors, Sommelier Finance. Please go check it out. We've got a lot of exciting things in the pipeline, and quick alpha leak. We might have a mainnet this month, so it depends on how hard Jack works, which I work pretty hard. And then we've also got OmniFlix Media is our sponsor. Thank you again to Sisla and the team there. And I would really encourage folks to go over and check out OmniFlix.network. Sisla is doing really cool things like token-gated Telegram rooms for validators, so that you can only join if you are delegating to an individual validator, and a bunch of other things for the digital creator economy. Very, very cool products. Go check out OmniFlix.network. And thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will have more of these in the future. So see you all soon.